Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for our Gather Movement Learning Community webinar. We are going to think about leading unity movements, and it's lovely to welcome you. My name is Mark Cowling. I work for Gather Movement as part of a small team. Well, we're going to ask some of our panel some questions. So if I can just open up a PowerPoint to show you. We're going to start by looking at this hexagon, which is a diagram that helps us to think about church unity from the work that the Gather team have done connecting with other unity networks across the country. We have discerned that there are commonly 6 foundations for flourishing church unity across a town or a city, and they are summarized here in collaboration, relationships, strategy, reaching the spheres, organization, and prayer. And so I'm going to ask our unity leaders. Some of them are working in a local authority context, and some of them are working beyond that. They're working across many local authorities or a combined authority or a county kind of space. So we're going to hear from people working in those different contexts. So let's open it up to Andy to share first. Andy, I've put up your markings on this diagram. We should just explain to people there's a little scale here. So if we ask our unity leaders to, and actually any church leader in their area, their town or city, to rate how strong they think these foundations are in terms of their unity network. So Andy, do you want to just talk us through what you've done for Exeter here and explain your arrows as well?
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Mark. Hello, everyone. Great to see you on the call today. Greetings from Exeter. We have found with our unity group in the city of Exeter, which is called One for Exeter, this diagram and the whole principle of the hexagon to be quite helpful. And over probably the last 4 years, or 3 years definitely, we've had this in the back of our minds as to kind of evaluate how we're doing and think about what our priorities should be, basically. So it's a shared exercise when we do it at best. If you mark yourself, if you're a bit harsh on yourself, you find that everything is a little bit low, maybe. And if you're very generous to yourself, you find all the numbers might be a little bit higher. But really, it's the changes that are going on that have caught our attention recently in Exeter. So, for instance, when we think about our relationships as Christian leaders in the city, we've had some really great relationships. And in the past, we would probably put 4 or even towards 5 because we've had such a strong links between church leaders, charity leaders, Christian faith community leaders. This last 3 years, we've seen many in transition. New folks have arrived in the city, some vacancies still remain. And so we're just aware that one of our priorities is that we need to strengthen relationships again. Hence the little arrow is with the cross there, just to say, well, we're in a direction of travel that we want to do something about. So you could almost technically reverse the direction of the arrow, but we're just highlighting where things have been changing for us. Strategy is marked there, and we've just been sitting down as a group, and we've got another strategic day early in the new year where we're kind of refining what we think we are about. So we're making progress in that area at this point in time. Our organisation, however, is fairly settled in the way it is. So we're not going to be paying too much attention to that just at the immediate point. But it's just been really helpful. We've got the Christians in the spheres influence increasing in the city. So we're just focused on where we are making our priorities. And it's really helpful, been really helpful for us to do that. So that's my picture of how we use the hexagon and through that diagram. Hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. And just in terms of building those relationships with new people, I know you were saying that sometimes it can be a challenge to grab their attention when they're on the learning curve in a new context. Do you think you'll do more of this one-to-one or by gathering church leaders overall across the city? Have you got any particular tactics for doing that?
We will do both and I think. We are exploring how we have lunches. We'll have one tomorrow together where we pray together ahead of Christmas. But a lot needs to be done through one-to-one connections as well. So we make sure that everyone who's arriving in the city as a new church leader feels really welcome, are invited for coffee or meals as appropriate to make connections. So it's both kind of ways of working, but I think the one-to-one is the strongest winner in all of that. But it's great when people actually then meet one another and they have sustaining friendship groups in the localities of the city as leaders, which is also really helpful.
And is it falling on you to do that, Andy, or are you part of a steering team of leaders that are all going to commit to that relationship building?
Yeah, so we have a steering group, and two or three of us are particularly aware of that issue. And there's one of the newer leaders actually in the city who's arrived more recently. He said, "Oh, my thing really is building relationships with leaders." So he's already saying he would offer to take on some aspect of encouraging leaders to pray together on a regular basis in the new year. So again, we're trying to make sure that it's a shared experience. It's not a done to strategy just from our core group.
Thank you. Brilliant. James Lynch from Sandwell. It's great to have you, James. Perhaps you could just reflect on Sandwell. You're quite a large borough with quite a lot of unity that's been going on for a number of years. Do you want to just perhaps reflect on this hexagon and tell us perhaps where you think your strengths lie in your unity network and whether you have a steering team that kind of is focusing on developing these foundations?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. We have a number of different groups. The group that I work with is Sandwell Churches Link. We tend to work more on the social action front and uniting churches along those kind of lines. We've seen a lot of success in that. We found that finding a common issue in the local area that other churches can unite around is really, really helpful in building that collaboration. In some ways, more than if you had a worship event or a kind of something that's more kind of a church service as such. So I think that breaks down some of the interdenominational barriers in different ways. So we've got sort of a real mix of kind of Catholic, high church, African church, Pentecostal church, etc., all kind of pulling together in some really exciting new sort of partnerships, which is really good. So I think relationship, going back to your plan there, is really, really important, and just recognizing the challenges of that. I'm interested in the arrow that's going backwards, going back down there. I think that represents for me that is a real area of challenge in terms of just recognizing the different ways that different churches want to meet together, different times of the day even, or different days of the week. But also it is a really, really challenging area, and I think if I was to put my version of this up, it would be a similar story. It is one of the biggest challenges, but also I think it's absolutely vital that we work in that area and do everything that we possibly can to bring those churches together into relationship with each other. So that's really key. In terms of strategy, I don't like to impose a strategy that I've got onto the situation. So for that, it's about arriving at something jointly that everyone's signing up to, and being able to say, yeah, that works for us, and that's how we can come together. Again, with the prayer, it's wanting to be inclusive. It's even some, it's a bizarre thing to say, isn't it? Because prayer is so common to all of us, but even the way in which we pray can be a challenge for including and bringing in some of the wider groups in our church networks. So we have to think really carefully about how we do prayer events that are inclusive and make everyone feel at home.
Yeah. Great, James. And James, I think one of the strengths in your area is the relationships and partnerships you've got with civic authorities. I mean, I guess, you know, you're a unity movement that has been going for a number of years now, and you've made a big impact as a strategic enabler of that. Just tell us about the kind of, fairly quickly if you can, but the journey of really seeing fruit coming from the partnerships with civic authorities.
Well, we're really lucky that when we started, we were founded by a partnership between the local diocese, of which there were 3, and the local Sandwell Council. So that really helps us because that's right at the very root of who we are. And it was a recognition 20 years ago that we needed to build that connection. But we worked really hard on that relationship by, again, not being too exclusive in our language or our media and stuff we send out, but making sure that we're reflecting and honouring our partners in the public sector as well. And that really does pay off. We invite guests of honour from the council to our annual conferences. We give them a platform there, and we really honour them and respect the fact that they're part of what we do. And they seem to be able to, in terms of reciprocity, they seem to be able to give a huge amount back to us in terms of social value, contributions towards the network, getting alongside some of the fundraising stuff that some of the food banks and other hubs in our area are needing to do. So it's a really, really fruitful relationship, and again, definitely worth the effort to try and reach out to those groups. Yeah,
super. Adrian, can I bring you in from Stockport and ask you just to share any reflections you've got on Renew Stockport, the Church Unity movement there, in terms of these 6 foundations and how it's going?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mark. Hi, everybody. I think we're it feels like we're fledgling. It feels as if we're beginners in this. What seems to have happened is that several strands of activity post-pandemic have come together, and we've begun out of those strands. One of those being prayer. So there's been a history of regular prayer going back several years, and people who've just constantly been either praying for the town, prayer walking, seeking to discern in the kind of spirit realm of what is happening in the town of Stockport. So that was one strand, a prayer strand. Another strand was the kind of beginnings of church leaders meeting on a regular basis in the centre of the town. Stockport's a 290,000 people, part of Greater Manchester, which is a 2.8 million conurbation and has a very strong identity. And Stockport is one of the 10 boroughs of Greater Manchester. And so there's the kind of citywide stuff that goes on. But in Stockport, there were groupings of leaders meeting together, probably mostly within kind of a grouping of evangelicals meeting. There are, in that size town, there are different groups of Anglican clergy. There's quite a strong Methodist circuit. But there was that kind of sense that people were meeting together, but there was a need to kind of draw all of those into a single place. Firstly, to pray, and then I think the other thing was there was a strong social justice, social action work going on in the centre of the town. So all these different things going on, and post-pandemic, we had the opportunity to start to draw that together. And I think out of that has come an identity that is based in prayer. There is now a cross-denominational grouping of people praying together and wanting to meet together. And so it almost feels like we're looking at 2025 as the opportunity to start to strategically work together. There's been mission together, been alpha courses and other follow-up courses together. And it feels a kind of bit of a patchwork. And now we're at the stage where probably around 20 or so leaders are wanting to think and pray and discern strategically. So I think coming over 2025, we probably get into the position where many voices together will be able to tackle something like the matrix here and begin to work out where we are. I think the person before me just said, and I could do this for myself and I could say where I think we are. I think others could do it, but I think the value of actually waiting, building relationships will bring us to the place where we can do this as a way of enhancing and expressing the unity that is really growing through our town. I think that's where I'll leave it, Mark, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's super. Thank you so much, Adrian. Well, let's bring in our friends from Nottingham, Simon and Nigel. I know that Social Action is I mean, you guys have been leading a unity movement for many years there, but I know that Social Action is quite a catalyst for some of the unity work you're doing. Do you want to just share your reflections on how it's going there?
Yeah, what we've found, which has been very encouraging over the past couple of years, particularly, that when we've, together with other partners, identified significant areas where there's a gap, really, and we've been able to bring together different partners to see if we can fill that gap. Last year, particularly, we began to identify a very significant gap in terms of affordable and ethical housing. So we were able to bring together local partners and the local authority together around a fairly major conference we did just over a year ago, and that's begun to develop real traction in terms of people working together in different parts of the county with local authority and churches together. That's really growing into something quite significant. This year we continue to do the housing stuff, but we found a different gap, particularly around providing support for vulnerable families. What was particularly interesting about that is that the vulnerable families issue, how to support welcome vulnerable families, was of interest both to some of the social action projects and to the churches as well. And we just a couple of weeks ago, we ran a conference to bring together people to provide some training around those issues. And that really brought in quite a wide spectrum of people from different charities, from different churches, all recognizing that there was a need that we needed to work on together. We work very closely with So Families on that. So this has been a big thing for us, a big kind of discovery in a way, is that we could address all sorts of different issues, but the ones that we seem to be making most progress with is where there's a real common sense, consensus, really, of recognizing that there's a need that we need to work on together, a gap that we need to fill.
Yeah, super. Thanks, Nigel. Again, Peter Lumsden, can I bring you in? Peter's working in a number of local authorities in Lancashire. And I know, Peter, you've had quite a bit of success with the church unity networks there, building civic relationships and collaboration, in particular using the mapping tool. And I'm just going to see if I can put a picture of that up so people can get an idea of that. But do you just want to come in and share a little bit about that?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Good to see everybody and to feel part of a wider community of practice. That's very reassuring. Probably even more fledgling than Adrian was describing in Stockport. As less than a year ago that we started doing mapping work in Pendle, which is in the far east of Lancashire. Just first on the hexagon tool. So we don't have any established unity networks, but having said that, I can see the hexagon being a really useful tool. And Adrian again said you could do this yourself, but it'd be a really good thing to do in conjunction with others. But doing it myself, I think that on the collaboration, and I think Andy in Exeter, even where you've got something well established, that one was a higher score than the other axes. And I would say that at the fledgling stage, those collaborations are going quite well. So yeah, we've been using the mapping tool, and that's been really well received by public sector partners. Got 2 lots of funding, just small amounts from the ICB for Lancashire, one to do it in Pendle, one to do it in Hyndburn. Interestingly, 3 local authority areas that we're now working in where we've had funding of some sort or another. So Pendle, the mapping work has gone well, and engagement with our local authority partners has gone well, but developing the church unity group much more slowly. The mapping tool, I think of it as 5 stages. You do the mapping, then you get a meeting, bringing people together to share the outcome. Networking, you get church and other faith leaders to start attending existing network meetings. The church unity movement itself, number 4. And then 5thly, get the funding to employ an enabler so that I can properly retire. So in Pendle, as I say, the mapping work has gone really well. In Burnley, we had a really good initial meeting because we worked in collaboration with the team leader for the Children and Family Wellbeing Service, who herself is a practicing Christian. In Hyndburn, not even started the mapping, but already I've managed to get 2 or 3 church leaders attending network meetings. And as a result, a local Methodist church has started up a monthly Families First drop-in where public sector partners are in attendance, and apparently that's going really well. So that mapping tool, well, the model, the framework, if you like, for doing the mapping, so far, it's proving to be really effective and to be really, really well received by public sector partners. What I want to do next with the maps we've got is to then add in those locations that are places of warm space, warm welcome, warm spaces and places of welcome, because our public sector partners really still don't know what is happening in the different churches and mosques in East Lancashire. We have a lot of mosques. So being able to add that further level of provision, the mapping tool will allow us to do that. I'm sure Mark can give me a quick tutorial on how to add those extra places. We just need another color, don't we, Mark? Or another shape symbol. So yeah, mapping work going well, still at a fledgling stage, but so encouraging to hear of the work in other places, and really interested when Andy was saying about the one-to-one meetings. I was chair of Lancashire Citizens and Citizens UK, being a community organising, and I'm sure some of you are either familiar with Citizens or even work with Citizens. The one-to-one conversation, finding out about the other person, finding out what your common shared interests are, the one-to-one for building relationships is foundational and fundamental.
Yeah. And, Citizens is a lot about, giving power back to the community, isn't it, for decision making,
Yeah,
particularly about services that they need.
Yeah.
You'd reflect that some of the stuff you've been doing with mapping has got a similar dimension to it. It's actually about trying to empower grassroots communities to have a voice and be involved with decision making.
I think so. I think just the very process of somebody sitting down with somebody from a church or a mosque and just going through the questionnaires and them having a chance to share what they are doing, I think is quite empowering just as a first step, because just as public sector doesn't know what faith is doing, so faith sector very often is not very aware of what's happening with public sector. So the mapping, recognizing, giving time for somebody to talk about what they're doing, but then giving them a sort of a roadmap almost of how you can start to become more connected with your neighborhood and what other services in the neighborhood are.
Thanks, Peter. And if anybody wants to know more about mapping, do get in touch with me at Gather Movement, and we can talk you through it. Let's go across to some towns in North Yorkshire. I'd like to bring in York and Harrogate. Let's go to Alison first. And Alison, I guess York and Harrogate are probably quite prosperous towns. But I think one of the things that's been noticeable about York is your commitment to praying together for so many years. Could you put your finger on why that's been so successful? Has there been something that you've learnt there that's that can help us?
Yeah, I think the relationships have been a key strength. So although the weekly prayer meetings that leaders have they've been going on for 25 years. But it's sort of relating first and then prayer second, I think. So the sort of a key value is about those relationships and always time in a meeting for people to pray together in twos so that we get to know each other and we get to know the issues around our ministries and churches. So that's sort of built a level of trust, and that I think has meant there's been some kind of commitment and personal engagement and longevity to the kind of the network in Yark.
Yeah. And you meet early morning, is that right?
We meet well, it's varied. At the moment we meet at 9:30
Okay.
on a Wednesday once a week, but in previous years it's been earlier, but at the moment that's sort of the settled kind of pattern of the meetings, and it's in a city centre venue as well, so it should be accessible to most people that are coming along.
Yeah, I mean, York's quite a big local authority. It's something like 200,000, isn't it? So
Yeah, that's right.
But it seems, having visited you, that it is quite accessible to meet in the centre. It's not too long a journey for people to make.
Yeah, it's not a big place actually.
Yeah.
Yark, even though it's quite dense. Sort of the
think
city
that's-
centre is quite dense with housing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, so that helps, doesn't it? Thank you. Sam Corduroy, I hope that you can hear us okay. Sam, again, I think some of the kind of spiritual transformation has been, a focus of your Unity group. Do you want to just tell us about the discipleship and that sort of influences, shapes your focus?
Yeah, so they kind of the main vision for what we're doing in Harrogate is really to fulfill our part in the Great Commission. So it's all about making disciples. And we've got kind of several pillars that we've got that we are working on to try and move that forward. So the first one is prayer. So we gather leaders together to pray with one another. We have a prayer meeting once a week where everybody's invited from all the churches, and that's going strong and growing, and it's a great opportunity for churches to pray for each other's mission and projects. And we've done 24/7 prayer together before as a town. Then the next thing we do, before we ask anybody to join in with any projects that we're doing, we're trying to change the culture in the local church in partnership with LICC, so that ordinary folk in church, ordinary Christians, feel equipped and empowered and enabled to be everyday missional disciples wherever God has already put them. So that's whether it's at school or work or play, on the street where they live. And we've gone on 3-4 year journey we're into at the moment, where we've been working with church leaders, first of all, to talk about the culture within individual churches and how our kind of behaviours as leaders, the way we preach, the way we ask for volunteers, how all that feeds into kind of the I guess the default narrative, which is about church happening on a Sunday and mission being about joining in with the church projects. And instead of shifting so that people believe that their work and what they do 6 days a week, 7 days a week, all of it matters to God. And so how can they live the whole of their lives differently? And we see that as a kind of critical pillar for how you see, well, two things. First of all, more people coming to know Jesus and deepening their relationship with Jesus, but also how we do civic engagement and how we engage with businesses and charities and schools and local authorities, because actually we have people from all those places already in our churches. So we don't need to set up another project. We feel it's about empowering people who are already Christians to live that out every single day. And then so we've got prayer and relationships. We've got what we call front lines, and then the third thing that we do is we've got an incubator. So that's about just trying out and experimenting with planting or supporting the planting of either missional expressions of church or new kingdom initiatives. So new projects that could share the good news, bring people into relationship with God, to grow the church. And the incubator bit is just where we try stuff, and we try loads of things and lots of them don't work, and we don't mind that they don't work. In fact, we love that they don't work because it means we're trying. But then there are some things that have really stuck, and the big one is youth work. Churches across the town have said we really want to reach out to unchurched teenagers, but we don't have the resources to fund our own youth worker, let alone one that reaches out. So they've clubbed together, we've employed somebody to do that, and we're currently setting up a whole series of different projects to do that, including inter-school mentoring, new youth club in the town centre, drop-in youth club opposite McDonald's. There's training for volunteers, there's raising of young leaders, and all of that hoping that we can do some spiritual transformation in the lives of young people in our town.
That's amazing, Sam. I'm fascinated by your work on front lines with LICC and teaching discipleship, making disciples that go out into their front lines, their workplaces, and are working out what it means to work out the Great Command and the Great Commission in those places. I imagine if anybody's going to be measuring that, it will be your Unity movement. Are you thinking about that in the future? How you actually measure whether that cultural work that you're doing in teaching is bearing fruit?
Yeah, so at the moment we've been looking at how many churches are actually engaging on it by either doing preaching seasons or proactively engaging in workshops to figure out how to bring it alive in their church. So I think that's the stage we've kind of been at for the last year or so. And then the other thing we're just starting to look at, starting to measure, is what fruit are we seeing? So where are we seeing workplace prayer groups being set up? Where are we seeing, for example, in one of the high schools, one of the teenagers has set up a Christian union in that high school. So where are we seeing kind of movement and fruit? But it's not much more technical than that at this stage.
Great. Thank you, Sam. Well, I'd like to just take you on to this next slide, if I can. Can you see this next set of boxes that talks about a big vision and 4 priorities? Is that coming through okay? Somebody give me a thumbs up. Yeah. This is one that this is a template that Gather have been using in the last year or so, and I'm going to ask Andy Mulcock from Exeter just to share how he's used it for thinking through church unity in Exeter. So Andy, over to you for this bit.
Thanks again, Mark. I knew it was a mistake sending you these ideas. This is more of a soul exercise reflecting on our last meeting together as a core group. So this is very much some ideas and work in progress. We had identified that for Exeter, we've had an established unity movement in the city for at least 30 years in one shape, form or another. At one point we had 3. That's where it got a little tricky, to have 3 unity movements all work in the city, but we brought that all together under this One for Exeter umbrella. And the goal in doing that was to see that everyone in the Christian community would play an active part in seeing the transformation that God could bring into the city, to be aware of it first and then to be involved in it, but that the city becomes increasingly aware of the church. So that's kind of our big vision, and that's been established probably for longer than, well, already 5 years or more. But that's really still where we're working towards, and we go through ups and downs, and we don't beat ourselves up too much when it seems like it's getting harder in certain areas. But just at the moment, to help with that, we had a conference recently where we had everyone from the church leaderships, the Christian faith community, the Christian charities, and others were invited to a conference where we heard from the city council, chief executive, the elected leader of the city council, and our local MP. And in that context, we were sharing together what contribution the church can make to the life of the city. How can we help was our kind of starting point. We have a new MP, we have a new chief executive of the council, so it was all getting to know you for the first time for them. So from that, we thought, well, we would like to get underway a mapping exercise. And actually, it was the superintendent of the city centre police who had commissioned one of the local churches in the city centre to undertake a mapping exercise. And that's just begun with a number of the others who've been involved in that sort of thing coming together. So we got a 1-year objective around that. But that fits into really kind of the 4 priorities that we've got that we'll establish over 3 years. You'll see the third box along in the 3-year line is an ongoing map of the city needs and every Christian contribution recognised. So that's one of the bigger blocks moving us forward, we think. But in the immediate, therefore, we have commissioned a mapping exercise and started to draw things together. And this is around what the church's offer would be particularly. And then it's just highlighting where the particular focus needs to be. The data collection is now underway, and I'll be reminding leaders to contribute to that tomorrow. We have the idea that we will explore whether we can get some kind of website or application, ideally an app, that people could just tap into to see what Exeter's what's happening in the city. It's just an idea at the moment. We don't have the tech to move that forward. The next, well, one of those other goals in the immediate is that the leaders who gather monthly for prayer would make this move and this mapping exercise a real priority for prayer as well, for its effectiveness and fruitfulness in it all. But to get to all of that, we still need 2 or 3 or 4 more people who will share in the process of the work. So the first goal is to say, get the team together. Second, get prayer together. The data collection is already underway because that's been commissioned by the police. And then we will plan for how that is going to be communicated in the longer term. That will help us to meet an objective or move towards an objective within a first year that will contribute to where we want to go in the long term.
That's fantastic, Andy. So yeah, helpfully explained to us, just getting a picture of those 4 timeframes from the immediate through to kind of the long-term plan